So earlier today, 3 Russian fighter jets entered NATO airspace where they flew around for 12 minutes before being pushed out by Italian F-35s. Look, Vladimir Putin continues to test NATO, and we continue to fail those tests. Unfortunately, this unprecedented escalation shouldn't be all that surprising after a drone attack into Poland barely a week ago was written off as a mistake by the United States. Now, with that statement and our lack of action, Putin saw a fracturing in the NATO alliance that he is continuing to take advantage of. This is going to continue until he's stopped. Now, diving into what we know so far, recognizing that this is a developing situation, and I want to note I've got a fundraiser update for you all in the back end of the video, last couple minutes of video from our friends over in the 47th, having purchased some of their vehicles. Fox News is reporting, quote, 3 Russian jets carrying ballistic missiles violated Estonia's airspace on Friday. The jets flew back and forth for over 12 minutes before Italian F-35s pushed them out. The jets were carrying high-speed air-launched ballistic missiles called Kinzhals. The White House could not be immediately reached about the incursion. I should note, as of this recording, I've not seen any official statements from the United States or Russia about this event. The BBC says Estonian media are reporting the Russian jets had their transponders switched off in the airspace of a NATO member, and the Estonian foreign minister said, quote, Russia has already violated Estonia's airspace 4 times this year, which itself is unacceptable. But today's incursion involving 3 fighter aircraft entering our airspace is unprecedentedly brazen. Russia's increasingly extensive testing of boundaries and growing aggressiveness must be met with a swift increase in political and economic pressure. They note that Estonia is considering requesting Article 4 consultations. That is essentially the NATO article where they say, hey, everybody, we've got something really serious to talk about. Let's all get together and hash it out. Technically, it could lead to Article 5, but there's no requirement in that direction. Now, to me, what we're seeing play out is very clearly a test of the NATO alliance by Putin. I mentioned this a little over a week ago when we saw 19 drones fly into Polish airspace. That was written off at the time by President Trump as a mistake. In fact, let's go ahead and play that video here real quick.
What's your reaction to Russian drone incursion into Poland?
Could have been a mistake. Could have been a mistake, but regardless, I'm not happy about anything having to do with that whole situation. But hopefully it's going to come to an end.
I just want to stress how much the Overton window has shifted when it comes to the protection of NATO countries and NATO airspace in a very short period of time. It was a couple of years ago where a Russian jet was shot out of the sky by Turkey as they either violated Turkish airspace or were on the verge of violating Turkish airspace, and nothing happened out of that, right? Some diplomatic tensions is all. We managed to avoid all-out nuclear war or a massive war between NATO and Russia because it was understood up until very recently, understood by Russia that if you push military aircraft or missiles or drones into NATO airspace, they are going to be shot down. Something has changed. Definitely in the last couple months. I would argue it's been kind of trending this direction from the start of the war, but you know, we've seen 1 or 2 drones at a time enter NATO airspace, fired from Russia or at times Belarus. They entered Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, and Poland. And every time we said, give it a second. Let's, there is a war happening right there. And there is a need for some caution, right? And not to overreact every single time. I get it. But we also have to recognize that Putin is continuing to push the envelope. In fact, when President Trump came out and said it might have been a mistake, Polish leaders, government leaders in Poland and other Baltic states and other NATO members very politely said it was not a mistake. I don't know what you're seeing that we are not, like, it was not a mistake. This is Putin testing the NATO alliance, a test that we failed then and continue to fail now. So following those 19 drones being launched, we didn't really get anything at all. There was the standing up of Eastern Guard. Russia today is mocking that, saying, what happened to this big operation you guys were set about? But when we look at further U.S. statements or the lack thereof in recent days, I was waiting for something to come from the U.S. Department of Defense or Secretary Hegseth or Department of War, whichever one we're going with. We still haven't seen anything at all. Like, the largest military in NATO hasn't commented at all. And I've seen some feedback saying, well, what do you expect the president to say? What do you expect the Department of Defense to say? Easy. We're still investigating what happened here, trying to get to the bottom of what actually played out, but let it be known that we stand with our brothers and sisters in arms in the NATO alliance, and we will protect every square inch of NATO territory. It doesn't have to be complicated at all. We don't need to threaten nuclear war with Russia. What I just said was essentially, was borderline, word for word, what NATO themselves said. It's not provocative to say that we are going to protect every square inch of NATO territory. That's what the alliance is. But the fact that that statement has not been made, from what I can tell, any senior U.S. officials since the large drone incursion into Poland is telling. It's sending a message to Putin, whether we like it or not. And the message being received is the alliance is fracturing. Let's test it a little bit more. I mean, what do you think? 3 MiG-31s got lost? You think they just happened to switch off their transponders thinking maybe they were entering Ukrainian airspace for the first time in God knows how long? Really? No, it's another test. Manned aircraft with hypersonic ballistic missiles strapped to their wings, flying around in NATO airspace. Let me be clear. NATO would have been fully justified, legally justified on the international stage to shoot those 3 down. Full stop. No questions asked. That is a direct threat to Estonia. They didn't. We'll wait and see what actually comes out of this. But if you're Russia, once again, as it sits here today, that was one step further he was able to go without any significant NATO response. Again, maybe something will come. Now, we did hear from Secretary Rubio, talked about this a little bit just a couple days ago. But again, I want you to take this clip and the next one from Matthew Whitaker, the U.S. Ambassador to NATO, and think about how this information is heard inside of Russia. So this is Secretary Rubio, our Secretary of State, being asked, hey, what about these 19 drones that were fired into Poland? Do you think that President Putin has been emboldened as of late? Listen to what he has to say.
I would say that this is an example of why this war, the president thinks, needs to end. Wars generally will escalate. They'll actually get worse, not better, if they continue on the track they're on, especially a protracted war like this one, which both sides are deeply dug in. Understand that these drone operations are far from the front lines. So they have no impact on the front lines. They're designed largely to weaken one another. Ukraine is conducting strikes in Russia as well. And it's one of the reasons why the president has said he wants this war to end. This war should end. It's why he's expended a tremendous amount of political capital, energy, and time in trying to bring it about to an end. No one in the world has done more to try to end the Ukraine-Russia war than President Trump has. But ultimately, it takes the two sides who are fighting to agree to it. And as you've said, and as you've pointed out, we haven't been able to get those kinds of results from the Russian side. But again, that's not Trump's war. Trump inherited this war, and now President Trump is doing everything he can to try to bring it to an end.
I don't know if you caught that in the middle there. He said, hey, Ukraine is attacking Russia too. They're firing drones and missiles into Russia too. That is not the comparison here. We're talking about NATO having their airspace violated by Russian military drones. It is not equal to say, yeah, well, Ukraine, a country that is currently at war defending their territory, happens to be, and a non-NATO member, by the way, is also attacking inside of Russia. What does that have to do with Russia attacking NATO? Again, the fact that this is not a top story in the United States is wild. That what we are seeing play out right now is arguably the most significant fracture in the NATO alliance. I don't want to get ahead of myself because it's possible we come back together and we actually do something here. But when the story of NATO airspace being penetrated by Russian drones, and let me be clear, what that was, launching drones into Poland, it was, maybe 5% reconnaissance. A lot of that could have been gathered without actually putting drones into NATO airspace. And it was maybe 5% or less testing NATO air defenses. The majority of the reason that Russia did that Putin authorized that operation, was to see how and if the NATO alliance would come together. He is getting his response in the way that President Trump says it was a mistake, the way that Secretary Rubio says, well, Ukraine is attacking Russia too. That is part of the response that Putin was looking for. And then we have Ambassador Whitaker here, the ambassador to NATO, who just earlier today, before this news came out that 3 MiG-31s had entered NATO airspace, saying, hey, overall, I think the Russian threat is overblown. Here we go.
But, I think the Russian threat sometimes is a little overstated. They have not had a lot of success. And to your point, Ukraine has actually taken back territory. And so, to me, that points to a weakness in Russia. And as their economy continues to falter, I think their continuation of this war is going to be difficult. But President Trump is going to continue to find the leverage and to find the conditions where he can bring both sides and mediate a resolution. Because, again, he's not going to set the conditions. Both sides are going to have to agree to a peace deal. But let's continue to work on this and continue to hope and pray that this resolves in the near future so that the deaths will end.
Again, just imagine how this is being received inside of Russia. Whether you're Putin or one of the leaders in the Kremlin, or we've got some mill bloggers here commenting on this, they're making fun of us for what it's worth. Now, we shouldn't make geopolitical decisions based off of what an internet blogger says or doesn't say, but I just want to get across, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at this and go, oh, NATO's not doing anything at all, huh? Alexander Kotz, on the news of the MiG-31s in Estonia, said, quote, "The Eastern Guard failed again. So it turns out our pilots were flying back and forth in the airspace of a NATO member state for a whole 12 minutes, and Western air defense did not react at all. Where's your Eastern Guard from the far north to the Mediterranean?" And let me hammer this home again. This is not Russia testing our air defense capabilities. It is not Russia testing the strength of a specific NATO member state. It is Russia continuing to test the NATO alliance. You know, are we willing to stand together? Are we willing to take lethal action to protect NATO territory? We, didn't do much after drones entered Polish airspace. Fortunately, there were no casualties. Today, we did not intercept 3 Russian MiG-31s. Again, no casualties from what I can tell from this operation today. If you're Putin, don't you just take it another step further? I don't think Putin is going to try to kill somebody, carry out a kinetic operation anywhere in NATO territory anytime soon, but isn't he getting the message that the alliance is not what we say it is? That when NATO puts out a press release about how we're standing together and we will not allow any violation of NATO airspace or territorial sovereignty, how can he believe that now? He knows there's at least a little bit of wiggle room. And even if it goes from 100%, there's no chance that Russia can enter NATO airspace, to 95%, that's a gap. And Putin is going to exploit that in some way, shape, or form. It might be with how he operates in Ukraine. It might be with how he operates in future conflicts with the Baltics. It might be how he perceives global relationships, maybe with North Korea or China. My guess is we're probably going to see more unconventional type tactics pushed into some of our Eastern European ally countries. And the longer that NATO goes without any significant response, the more threatening I think those unconventional methods will be. Now, real quick, I wanted to provide an update on a fundraiser. A couple months ago, we were picking up some vehicles for our friends in the 47th Mechanized and the 25th Airborne Brigade. I'm still in the process of gathering all of the receipts. The goal is to provide, of course, a final roll-up, but all of the purchases haven't been made yet. So I'm trying to wait for that one to all be done, and then we'll put it all together in one easy place to see. So I put this information out on X, Instagram, TikTok, and now YouTube. So first off, quick video from our friends in the 47th after they received one of their ATVs. The message for you all. Let me play that real quick.
Guys, our English not so great as your support, but we want to say you something.
Слава Україні! Героям слава! Україна! Понад усе!
All right, so the 47th, I think we sent them around $26,000, which is incredible that you all came together for that. They've purchased one ATV, one truck, and I think they have one more ATV and a trailer in the process of being purchased. The 6th Rangers were operating up in Sumy. We got them 4 thermal optics. Those were purchased and delivered, so those are being utilized right now and have been for a while. Those are the first things to get there. And then in the 25th Airborne, we know they've purchased 3, maybe 4 trucks at this point. Hey, look, the goal was to get them 1, but you guys came together with such incredible funds, such incredible support that they got 3 or 4, which they need, right? Because from the time we started talking to them to the time we finished the fundraiser, they went from needing 1 truck to needing 5. That's what happens when guys are fighting in areas like the 25th is down in Pokrovsk. Trucks get blown up. That's just the nature of this war. So they're in the process of finalizing a couple more purchases. We should get those receipts as well. I don't want to give a timeline, but I'm kind of optimistic that in the next couple weeks, we'll have a final roll-up from that fundraiser, and I can show you exactly where every single dollar went, because I think that's really important, that you know that where you donated, it actually went to the cause you thought it did. It did. I'm just in the process of showing the evidence to support that. But thank you all so much for your incredible generosity with that fundraiser and others. It's always, always humbling to see. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.